Have you ever wondered why some of the most extraordinary stories never make it into the history books? Welcome to 7 Continents, One Story.
So glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, this is literally my favorite place to be. Let's go.
I'm Selene, based in Edinburgh, Scotland. History hobbyist, library regular, endlessly curious.
I'm Nils, professor of history from Sweden. I've spent decades collecting these stories.
And I'm Ethan from Malta. I'm the one who always asks what happened in Japan.
Each episode, we travel together through time, across all 7 continents, to uncover a story that shaped the world.
We bring the history. Selene brings the questions that make you think differently about it.
And I bring the questions that make Nils slightly nervous.
The more we learn, the more we realize how much there still is to discover.
Okay, so I just found out about this, and I genuinely cannot believe nobody talks about it. There was a city, a real city, and the legend says the whole thing started with a single cow.
A cow? Ethan, what on earth are you talking about?
Not the cow exactly, the skin of a cow, one oxhide, and a woman who outsmarted a king with it.
Ah, you have been reading ahead, Ethan, and you are not wrong. One of the greatest cities of the ancient world, a city that would one day stand toe-to-toe with Rome itself, begins in the story with a clever trick and a piece of leather.
All right, now I want the whole thing. Where are we and when?
North Africa, the coast of what is today Tunisia, and the traditional date is 814 BCE.
That is nearly 3,000 years ago.
Almost 2,800 years. But before we go there, I brought something with me today, from my collection. It is small, a slab of pale limestone. You could hold it in 2 hands, and carved into it is a symbol. A triangle at the bottom, a flat bar across the middle, and a circle floating on top.
A triangle, a bar, and a circle. That sounds almost like a little person, arms out wide.
That is exactly what people see, Selene. A figure with raised arms. And here is what unsettles me. It looks modern, clean, almost like a logo you would see today. But it is older than Rome, and nobody can fully agree what it meant to the people who carved it.
Okay, that is so cool and kind of eerie. What is it?
Patience. That is clue number 1. We will get there.
So, Nils, before the cow and the clever woman, who were these people? Where did they even come from?
They were Phoenicians, and to understand them, you have to understand the sea. The Phoenicians came from the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, modern-day Lebanon. Their great cities were Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. And by the 9th century BCE, they were the finest sailors and traders the world had ever seen.
Wait, so this is not really an African story to start with? It is people from the Middle East sailing west?
Imagine a city like Tyre. It was an island fortress, bristling with towers, its harbors packed with ships from every corner of the known world. They were masters of cedar wood, of glassmaking. But their real genius was a secret they guarded fiercely, a sharp question, and the answer is, it becomes an African story. That is the heart of it. These were Eastern Mediterranean sailors who planted a city on African soil, and over time it grew into something entirely its own.
And why leave home at all? If Tyre was so successful, why sail off into the unknown?
2 reasons. First, trade. The Phoenicians wanted secure stopping points, way stations, all along the great sea routes, especially the route running west toward the silver and copper of Spain. And second, pressure. Back home, great empires were rising in the east. The Assyrians were growing hungry. A wise trading city needed options.
So it is kind of like, if your hometown is getting risky, you set up shops in other places, so all your eggs are not in one basket.
That is precisely it, Ethan. Carthage was, at first, a branch office. A very, very ambitious branch office. And you know, this is where I cannot help myself. Much like the Vikings in the north centuries later, the Phoenicians were a seafaring people who spread not by conquering armies, but by ships, small groups, traders and families, setting up footholds on distant shores.
So not invasion, more like seeding settlements along the coast.
Exactly. The Vikings did it in the cold gray north, Iceland, Greenland, the British Isles. The Phoenicians did it in the warm blue south, different seas, same instinct. Follow the water, find the harbor, build the trading post.
2,000 years apart and basically the same playbook. That is wild.
Now, the legend gives this founding a face, a name. According to the ancient writers, the founder was a woman, a Tyrian princess. The Romans called her Dido, but her own people called her Elissa.
A woman founding a great empire in the ancient world. That is already unusual.
It is, and we have to be honest from the start. We will come back to just how much of her story is history and how much is legend. But hold the name Elissa. We are going to need it. Now, back to my little limestone slab. Clue number 2. These stones were not made for kings or battles. They were made for the gods. They stood in a sacred place near the harbor. And on many of them, beneath that strange triangle and circle symbol, people carved words of thanks.
Thanks for what?
For prayers answered. For a wish granted by the goddess. I have stood in the museum in Tunis and looked at row after row of these stones, thousands of them. Each one, someone's quiet hope, carved in stone, almost 3,000 years ago.
That gives me chills. Ordinary people reaching out to something larger than themselves. And the stones outlived every one of them.
They did. Hold that feeling, because that sacred place will matter very much before we are done. Let me take you there. The year in the story is around 814 BCE. The place is Tyre, a proud city of stone and harbors. And inside the royal palace, a tragedy is unfolding.
What kind of tragedy?
The old king has died. He leaves 2 children, a son named Pygmalion and a daughter, Elissa. Pygmalion becomes king, and Elissa is married to a man named Acerbus, a priest of the great god Melkart, and a man of enormous wealth.
I feel like the wealth is about to become a problem.
You have good instincts. Pygmalion wants that wealth, and so, according to the ancient account, he has Acerbus murdered, his own sister's husband, killed for gold.
Her own brother. That is monstrous.
And Elissa is left with a terrible choice. Stay in a city ruled by the man who killed her husband, or flee into the unknown across the open sea.
What did she do?
She gathered loyal followers, nobles unhappy with the king, and she slipped out of Tyre by ship, sailing west, away from everything she had ever known. She stopped first at Cyprus, gathering more people, and then she sailed on to the coast of North Africa.
Okay, but hold on. She's a refugee. She arrives on a foreign coast with a bunch of ships. Why would the local people let her just build a city there?
Ah, Ethan, you have just walked us straight to the most famous part of the whole legend. They did not simply let her, she had to bargain. And this is where the cow comes in.
The Oxhide. Finally.
Picture it. Elissa goes to the local Berber ruler, the people the ancient writers call the Libyans. She asks for land for her people, and the ruler, not wanting to give away too much, makes what he thinks is a clever, stingy offer.
What does he offer?
He says, you may have as much land as can be covered by a single ox hide. 1 cow's skin, that is all.
That is nothing. You could not fit a house on that. That is barely a picnic blanket.
Exactly what he intended. He thinks he has dismissed her with a riddle. So here is our question for you, the listener. You are Elissa. You have crossed the sea. Your people are exhausted, and you are offered a scrap of land the size of a cowhide. What do?
Do you accept the insult and take your tiny patch? Do you walk away and keep sailing? Or is there some way, any way, to turn 1 oxhide into a kingdom? Honestly, my instinct says you keep sailing. 1 cowhide of land is an insult. You take your ships and you find people who will actually deal with you fairly.
But she has been sailing forever. Her people are done. At some point, you have to plant your feet somewhere. I think you take the deal, but you have to find a trick. There has to be a loophole.
And this is what I love about this moment. Both of you are right. Selene, the safe path is to leave. Ethan, the bold path is to find the angle. The whole future of one of history's greatest cities turns on which kind of person Elissa is.
So, which was she?
She was the second kind. Elissa agrees to the deal. 1 oxhide, and then she does something brilliant. She takes the hide and she cuts it, not into pieces, into 1 single, impossibly thin strip, round and round like peeling an apple in 1 unbroken ribbon.
No way. So instead of 1 flat patch?
She gets a thread of leather long enough to encircle an entire hill. And the land within that circle becomes hers. Enough for a fortress. Enough for a city.
She turned a riddle back on the man who said it. That is genius.
And this is why, for centuries, The citadel at the heart of Carthage was called the Byrsa, which in Greek sounds like the word for Oxhide, the hill of the hide, the trick, written into the map of the city forever.
That is the best founding story I have ever heard.
But Nils, you keep saying in the story. How much of this actually happened?
This is the honest part, and it matters. Our sources for Elissa are all Greek and Roman writers, people writing centuries later and from the outside. The most detailed version comes from a writer named Justin, who was summarizing an even older, lost history. And then Elissa, as Dido, became immortal in the great Roman poem, the Aeneid, by Virgil.
So she might be made up.
Not entirely. Here is the fascinating part. There really was a historical Pygmalion, king of Tyre, in roughly the right century. He is well attested. So the family, the dynasty, that is solid ground. But the romance, the Oxhide, the precise events, those we cannot verify. What we can say is that the legend may preserve real memories in dramatic form, a flight from danger, a bargain with local people, a woman at the center of a founding, all distorted, but perhaps not invented from nothing.
So the truth is somewhere in the leather strip between fact and story.
Beautifully put.
Okay, but the actual city, we can dig that up, right? What does the ground actually tell us?
Now we are on firm soil, literally. Archaeologists have been excavating Carthage since 1921, and here is where it gets interesting. The legend gives us 814 BCE, but the oldest pottery they have found dates to around 760 BCE.
So the spade and the story disagree.
At first, they did, but then came radiocarbon dating. A team from the University of Ghent tested remains from the earliest layers, and those results pushed the date back toward the final quarter of the 9th century BCE. Some assessments now place the oldest layer around 865 BCE, give or take a few decades.
So the legend was actually pretty close.
Remarkably close, and that is the lesson. Ancient traditions are not always pure fantasy. Sometimes, buried inside the story, there is a real grain of memory. The scholars now agree Carthage was founded in the second half of the 9th century, right in the neighborhood the ancient writers claimed. And now, my limestone slab. Are you ready for the last clue?
More than ready.
Here it is. That symbol, the triangle, the bar, the circle with arms raised, it represents a goddess, the great protective goddess of Carthage. Her name was Tanit, and the symbol itself is known to this day as the Sign of Tanit.
So that little modern-looking logo is actually a goddess.
A goddess of fertility and protection. And alongside her, the god Baal-Hamon. The Phoenicians who founded Carthage brought their gods with them across the sea, especially Melkart, the patron of Tyre. But over the centuries, on African soil, their faith changed. It blended. Tanit rose to become the beating heart of Carthaginian devotion. That symbol is the fingerprint of a whole civilization, Phoenician roots, African home, a new identity all its own.
So the artifact is the story, a people who left home and slowly became something new.
That is exactly what it is.
Can I ask something that has been bugging me? If Phoenicians sailed over and built the city, were the Carthaginians basically just Phoenicians living abroad?
Oh, Ethan, you have asked the question that is rewriting the textbooks right now. Until very recently, everyone assumed exactly that. Carthage equals transplanted Phoenicians. But in 2025, a study was published in the journal Nature that changed everything.
What did they find?
A team led by a researcher named Harold Ringbauer at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig analyzed ancient DNA from around 210 people across 14 sites all over the Mediterranean, and the result was astonishing. The people of Carthage had surprisingly little direct Levantine, that is, Phoenician, ancestry.
Wait, the Phoenician city was not genetically Phoenician?
The largest genetic contribution came from people similar to ancient Sicily and Greece, and as Carthage grew, North African ancestry blended in too, so the city was a true melting pot. As Ringbauer put it, Phoenician culture spread not by mass migration, but by a dynamic process of cultural transmission and assimilation.
So it was never one people conquering. It was many peoples mixing and adopting a shared way of life.
A hybrid from the very beginning. Phoenician know-how, Sicilian and Aegean neighbors, North African roots, all woven together. That, to me, is more beautiful than any single bloodline. Carthage was, from the start, a city of the whole sea.
So how does this little trading post become the city that scares Rome?
Slowly, then all at once. For its first centuries, Carthage still honored Tyre, even sending tribute back to the Temple of Melkart, a respectful daughter to her mother city. But then the east fell into crisis. The Babylonians, under Nebuchadnezzar II, besieged Tyre for years. The mother city was brought low.
And as Tyre weakened, Carthage was free to grow.
By the 6th century BCE, Carthage stood on its own. It built a navy. It dug an astonishing double harbor, a rectangular one for merchants and a circular military one for warships. It governed itself through elected officials called sophetes, 2 of them at a time, judges and leaders chosen each year. Not kings. A republic in its way, centuries before many others.
Elected leaders that early, that is so cool.
The Greek thinker Aristotle actually praised the Carthaginian system for its stability. From one Oxhide land to a maritime power that ruled the Western Mediterranean for over 600 years. And now, let us come back to her, the name I told you to hold, Elissa.
The princess who fled.
In Virgil's telling, the story ends in heartbreak. The Trojan hero Aeneas lands at Carthage. Elissa, Dido, falls in love with him. And when he sails away to fulfill his destiny in Italy, she takes her own life on a funeral pyre. A Roman poem, making the founder of Rome's greatest enemy die of love for Rome's own ancestor.
That is brutal. They turned her into a tragedy to make themselves look bigger.
And that is exactly why she deserves to be remembered properly, not as a footnote in someone else's epic. Whether she lived exactly as the legend says, or whether she is a memory woven from many real women, Elissa stands for something true. A leader who lost everything, crossed the open sea, outwitted a king, and founded a city that would echo for 3,000 years. History gave the glory to Rome, but remember the woman of the Oxhide. Remember Elissa. Remember the name.
Remember Elissa?
Remember the name.
Nils, there is one thing I have read about Carthage that always comes up. The darker rumor about the sacred place, the one with the stele.
Yes, and we should speak of it honestly and with care. That sacred ground is called the Tophet. The ancient Greek and Roman writers, the enemies of Carthage, claim the Carthaginians sacrificed their children there.
Is that true?
This is where modern science has brought real compassion to an old accusation. A study led by the physical anthropologist Jeffrey Schwartz examined the remains of hundreds of children from the urns, and he found that at least 20% of them were not even born yet when they were buried. They could not have been sacrificed. His conclusion was that the Tophet was, above all, a burial ground for the unborn and the very young, however they died.
So a place we were taught to fear may really be a place of grief, of parents burying babies they had lost.
That is the most likely truth. Scholars still debate the edges of it, but the heart of it is human and tender, a people mourning their children and entrusting them to a goddess with her arms raised in protection. The same sign of Tanit on my little stone. So, what did we discover today?
We learned that one of the ancient world's greatest cities began, in legend, with a clever woman and a single oxhide cut into a thread.
We learned that the spade and the story almost agree. The late 9th century BCE, just as the ancient writers claimed.
And we learned the deepest surprise of all. Carthage was never one people. It was a city of the whole sea, Phoenician, Sicilian, Aegean, North African, blended into something new, with its own goddess, its own republic, its own destiny.
And we learned to remember Elissa, the founder Rome tried to write into a tragedy.
Remember Elissa. Remember the name.
You know, that is what stays with me. We started with what felt like a fairy tale, a cow, a trick, a runaway princess, and underneath it, the ground gave us something just as remarkable. Real people from many lands choosing to build a home together on a foreign shore. The legend made it magical, but the truth made it human. And honestly, the truth is the better story.
It really is.
The more we learn, the more we realize how much there still is to discover.